Okay, here we are in part 6 of how to create a plan for a winning business. And part 6 is all about financing. We've gone through all of the operational stuff. We've heard about how to create the business in the first place and go through all the disciplines of running a business. But you don't have much at all until you've got enough money to actually get this business going in the first place. It has to be financed. I'll use that term a lot here. Your business must be financed. Money has to come in to pay for all of this stuff we got through talking about in parts 1 through 5. So that's what we're going to cover now. What are the various forms of financing? So I want to share with you a slide that I did many years ago that depicts the many forms of financing a business. So let me get this chart positioned so you know how to read it. Along the top, I've laid out 5 steps of maturity of a business from the very seed stage of an idea, just starting. We haven't even done the work on the business plan yet, so it's very early. But it leads to a point in time where the intellectual property and the heart of the business is being created. You're in the midst of market planning, sales planning, and starting, quite frankly, most of what you're going to need in financing the business. And then leading to the third level of maturity is the startup phase itself, where you're actually launching your business. You've done all the planning and you're ready to go. So you're now going to actually bring it to market through your marketing programs and sales programs. Then the fourth stage is that of expansion. You've gone through startup. You've been in it for a year or thereabouts. You've started to be profitable, or you're rapidly approaching it and being cash flow positive. You may not be break even yet, but you're ready to take on some more money to expand the business further in the marketplace. Startup was market entry. Expansion means expanding into a broader market than you started with. These latter stages I'm really not going to cover here because they're way down the road, and they're in the realm of institutional investors, venture capital firms, investment bankers, where you're dealing with mergers and acquisitions and subsequent financing to greatly expand the business into other markets than the ones that you started with in your startup and expansion phase. So these terms I'm going to use throughout the rest of this part 6 of financing, but I'm going to cover various forms of financing: bootstrapping, grant financing, which is non-dilutive, crowdfunding, and a couple alternatives for that. The famous friends and family form of financing, both debt and equity forms of it. The famous angel investors, of which I'm a part, who do predominantly equity financing under preferred terms. And then, of course, the possibilities for bank loan and debt from personal individuals. I'm going to cover all of those and talk about the first form of financing. You've heard the term before. It's called bootstrapping. This is where an entrepreneur, under their own steam and their own money, starts a business. They've saved up enough to get going. Now, let me tell you what that means, though. How much does it take to start a business in the first place? Well, it depends on the business. But I'll tell you something, it isn't free. Starting a business is kind of expensive. So think about it. Starting any business, you're going to have to get incorporated. You may or may not need a lawyer. You may or not need an intellectual property attorney. You may need marketing people if you're not really good at putting together a website and running social media campaigns and do social posts and email campaigns and use all the tools that go into that make it effective. You may need to pay people for that. And the list goes on. Quite frankly, if you're going to start a services-oriented business, there's no hardware, there's no software to be developed. You may be in the $30,000, $40,000 range to start a business, just on the things I previously mentioned. Again, it depends on the complexity of what you're doing and how complicated your marketing programs have to be, which is going to be one of the bigger expense items. So bootstrapping is a viable way to go if you've got some money in your own, or a combination of bootstrapping and other financing alternatives that I'm going to talk about over the rest of this presentation. So someone who's bootstrapping their business perhaps is using their own money, maybe the money of other co-founders. Maybe you pool the money amongst the 2 or 3 or 4 of you, but it comes from the entrepreneurs themselves. And they're going to use that money to take them all the way through the first 3 steps of the financing track I showed you in that slide earlier. That is the ideation and this all the way through the startup, and perhaps even the expansion phase if they've reached a cash flow positive position by that time, that is. But the whole idea is they've got enough money amongst them to actually finance all of those steps themselves, and they manage their cash flow accordingly. Bootstrapping is really good for a services-oriented business, but if you've got hardware and software to be developed, you could be in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $300,000, depending on the magnitude of what it is you have to develop. So think about it. The reason you may need help from others through these other forms of financing is because there's so much money that is needed that you don't have it all yourself, and you're going to have to get it from others by other means. But bootstrapping is a really good way to go. The result of that is you and your co-founders own the whole company yourselves. You just split it up amongst you, and you don't owe anybody else anything. That's a pretty good place to be. It usually is the world of seasoned entrepreneurs who have the personal finance to actually do this. So that's bootstrapping. The next form is kind of specialized. They're grant financing. The ones I'm most familiar with are predominantly the technology world and the life sciences world as well, that come out of grant offerings from the federal government, for example. Sometimes state and city governments offer up grants. They're usually for something that fulfills the purpose of the agency that's offering the grant, whether it's Health and Human Services or any of the other government agencies that put up these SBIR grants that you probably have heard about. But the grants also come from private foundations, but they are often the realm of for nonprofit organizations and for a social purpose. So if you're a nonprofit organization, which is just as entrepreneurial as anything, you should actually pursue grant financing from corporate and other private institutions that offer grant financing for a social purpose. You go search through their websites and see what their criteria is or what it takes to get one of their grants, and you may want to go ahead and apply for them. So that's grant financing. The good thing about it is, for most, if not all of these grants that you can imagine, this is money that you don't have to pay back. You have to give reports on what you did with the money. You're going to report your progress through the course of the use of the grant, but at the end of it all, this is not a loan you have to pay back or equity financing that you've sold a part of your company to these granting authorities. If you haven't done so yet, look into the possibility of grants. The next is, I would say, it's new on the scene. It's still maturing. Crowdfunding comes in several forms. One is rewards-based crowdfunding campaigns that you give a reward to people who provide financing to your business. If you're introducing a new product and somebody gives you $500 because they're donating it, this is donation based. They're donating money to your business, and you return to them maybe a discount or a free version of or early use of your product and or service. So crowdfunding, rewards-based, donation-based crowdfunding is a start. The other is equity or loan-based crowdfunding, where, just as the name depicts, you're borrowing money from people on the internet, or you're taking equity financing. These are people who buy stock in your company all over the internet. So these are great sounding alternatives, but there's a lot of work involved in doing these. This is not a panacea by any stretch of the imagination. The challenges of all the marketing work you're going to have to do and the development of a website that brings people to see what your company is all about, and the things you have to do to seed this crowdfunding bucket so people see that you're absolutely for real and you've already got people signed up before you even launch the program, and many other things that you're going to have to do in order to run a successful crowdfunding campaign. It takes a lot of work and a lot of money to get them going in the first place. You should think that it's going to cost $20,000 to $30,000 to run a crowdfunding campaign, particularly the financing versions. The donation-based, probably less money. You should think about $10,000 to $15,000 when you get all said and done running all the marketing programs you're going to have to run in order to attract people to it. But crowdfunding is a way to do it, and people have been successful at it. Possibility you can be as well. The next is the famous friends and family and fools alternative. I call this financing through friends and business associates. Family, you're going to think twice about because you don't want to lose your Aunt Sue's money, Grandpa and Grandma's money, or retirement savings either. Thanksgiving dinner is going to be tough to sit through if you do that. But friends and family is a very viable way to go. In fact, I suggest it as an alternative to going to the serious angel groups and formal banking institutions. Friends and family is you're either borrowing from or taking an equity financing from a family friend or a past business associate, but a private person who you know and who knows you and trusts you. You trust each other. There's a relationship there already. So these people are likely to be the ones that will try to help you as much as they can financially, depending on their net worth and what their regard is for you and what they think of your business idea. You could finance a substantial part of your business just on people you know. In fact, I suggest those are the people you go to first for substantial financing purposes. People you know, people who trust you, and vice versa. You'll have a lot better luck. The due diligence process will be a lot easier. The terms you'll get are going to be much more friendly to you because they want to see you succeed. And they trust that if you borrow money from them, you will somehow pay them back. That's kind of the deal you'll make. So, friends and family, think about it and seriously consider it. It's a very common and a very viable way to get a business started in the first place. The next are those angel investor groups, the ones that you hear about all over the United States. There's hundreds of them in the major cities. Here in Research Triangle Park, we have a dozen or more that have various purposes. Throughout the Southeast, there's 3 or 4 dozen of these angel investor groups. And these are formal organizations. They're incorporated into limited liability companies quite often. And they stand ready to put together a financing package where the money coming from an angel group or a private group of angels for equity in your company. They want to buy stock in your company, and they want to buy preferred stock. They want to get paid first. Go figure, huh? And all sorts of other terms I'm not going to go into here. That's a subject of another conversation. But it's a viable way to go. If you don't get all of what you need with friends and family, and you've tried all the other alternatives, these are people you probably going to have to come to. Now, I happen to be one of those people that help run an angel fund here in Research Triangle Park. And I'm sitting here trying to convince you, don't come to us until you try these others. I do that because I'm your friend. I want to see you get the best deal. Angels are a great place to go, and they're going to help you. They're going to invest in your company, and they're going to try to help you as much as they possibly can by referral to people you need to know, to companies that you should be doing business with, potential customers that you should be selling to. They're going to open up their Rolodexes. I know, half of you don't know what a Rolodex is, right? Your contact list, and introduce you to people that you should know. Angel investors are a viable way to go. It's a long road. Think about 3 to 4, maybe 5 months to nail down an angel investing deal, because it takes much of that time to do the due diligence, because the people on these groups have full-time jobs and they do this part-time. So it's going to take a while. It may be a little bit frustrating, but you can get a lot of money this way in your first round of financing. Don't forget loans. I covered it a little bit. You can get loans from friends and family, as I mentioned earlier. You can get loans through crowdfunding, as I mentioned earlier. You can also get loans from private individuals, but you can also get loans from financing institutions. Regional banks, I suggest you go to the more local banks, where they're a little bit more free to make judgments about your credit worthiness, for example. If you ask for a loan from any of these institutions, you're going to have good credit, no bankruptcies, please. Credit scores in the mid 600s. This may be out of date already, but it's not 510. You ought to be thinking north of 600. If you have all that in place, you've got a good chance of getting a loan, even from a bank. But go to the bank institutions that are local, more local, that are run by local people. They're regulated, but not as stringently as the multi-hundred-billion-dollar banks that, I won't mention their names, but you know who they are. They're the ones that have the most branch office names that you see when you drive anywhere in town here. Loans from financing institutions are also viable, even for the early stage. You got to put up the collateral, though. Finally, and quite often, it is forgotten by many entrepreneurs that it is possible to be financed by one of your business partners, or it could be financing from your first few customers. So think about it. If you've got a business partner who finds that your product or service is very complementary to theirs, where you could go to market together, and what you bring to the table for the customers that they want to sell to, and vice versa, you may have an opportunity for them to finance you, and you pay them back handsomely. They're not going to do it for no interest whatsoever, but you pay them back in the course of landing new customers until the financing is paid off. Or they may take equity position in your company and provide money that way. It's more likely it's going to be more of a barter deal, this for that, over a period of time. So these partners could also be represented by your first few customers. If you have a customer that is really interested in what you're doing and wants to be part of it, you could ask them for financing and return to them handsome discounts over a long period of time, perhaps equity. I would suggest that you wait on that and use that as a coin you play, if you have to play it towards the end of the negotiation, if you need to, but pay them back over a long period of time, handsomely. So don't forget your early partners and your first customers as a source of possible financing. So that's it. Those are the financing alternatives. Your challenge is to create a plan for the financing of your business. And the way you do that is through your financial forecast. You estimate how much money you're going to need to get this business up and running to the point where you're cash flow positive, and will be cash flow positive from there forward. However much money, how much cash you needed in order to get through that period of time is how much money you need to start with, plus a contingency of some kind of probably 40 or 50% on top of that, just in case something goes wrong. And believe me, something will. So you might as well have some contingency on that estimate. So if you've got that much money, great, get going. If you don't, you've got to get it from one of these other sources. So I wish you the best in your own financing plan. Have a great day.